Guys, I'm really delighted to welcome to the podcast a friend of ours, Stelio Savante, an award-winning South African actor and producer. He's been in a ton of movies, including a movie that Debbie and I made called Infidel with Jim Caviezel in the lead. Stelio has a new movie. It's called Pursuit of Freedom. Debbie and I watched. We loved it. Terrific film. It opened in theaters September 16th. It's also available on demand. Stelio, thanks for joining us. First of all, you played in Infidel. You played a you played an Israeli Mossad agent. In the new film, Pursuit of Freedom, you play an Eastern European pastor. And I just want to commend you at the kind of versatility of the roles that you play. You're completely credible, even though you're playing people in different walks of life and from different countries. So we really enjoyed this film. Talk a little bit about the film and also about your role in it.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on. I absolutely had a blast shooting the film Infidel. Very proud of that film. This film is based on a true story, Dinesh. We shot it in Indiana. Lonnie Norris found the story because he was living in Europe as a missionary, very heavily involved in ministry. They were sitting around a table. He met several of the people who had been involved and said, this really needs to be made into a film. To make a long story short, we fast forward. He had known the director, George, from having actually built the man's home. Unbelievable, because Lonnie's not from show business. He's from a completely different background. George adapts the story. We spend a little bit of time getting to know and hear the story of the real people, because their identities are concealed in the film, on this incredible journey to rescue Anna and her children who are human trafficked.
I mean, this is the theme, right? The theme of the film is human trafficking. A woman with small children gets separated from her children. She goes through horrific experiences. Now, the film I think, handles that beautifully. It does not go full on in showing you all the brutality, and yet it conveys the trauma that this woman went through. And of course, the story is how she came into contact with missionaries who helped reunite her with her children. I mean, just powerfully moving. It's emotionally a little overwhelming toward the end. Talk a little bit about you play a Christian pastor who is sort of tasked with trying to bring this family together against considerable odds.
Yes, I'm playing Bedros, Armenian missionary who was out in the field. They were actually all present at a conference. There were people and delegates there from 22 different countries. A phone call comes in, and despite his wife's best advice, he decides now she actually makes fun of him being a private investigator, which he's most definitely not. The Lord called. We have to go out. We have to help. We have to go find these children. We have to try help reunite them with their mother. And I couldn't agree more. I love that the filmmakers chose not to be gratuitous. As I've said in the past, sometimes the suggestion of something is actually stronger than having it seen, because the human imagination, especially in a great medium like film, I think you can convey a lot by showing less. And what we've been so surprised with, Dinesh, is how the secular mainstream critics have responded to it. This film isn't necessarily made for a Christian audience. It's made for a significantly bigger audience. It's shot like a European film. Depending on how you appreciate or consume film, the layers kind of unravel slowly, and the third act is heavily emotional. As you said, there wasn't a dry eye in the house when we had the Los Angeles screening. We have been playing in theaters, and it's available on demand everywhere right now.
One little touch that I found, and this confirms your point about the kind of European perspective of the film. You have, of course, the famous kind of Eastern European and Armenian, I would call it the Stoic style, and you introduce a note of comedy in the film because you have this sort of American pastor, and he's a great guy, but he's totally over the top. He laughs, he cries, he goes to emotional extremes, and you can see that how from the European European perspective, this is all, well, let's just say all too American.
It most definitely is. And I like that there was the humor in there. I felt that levity, especially because this film is heavily dramatic. It's based on a true story. The stakes couldn't be higher. To have that little bit of levity there in there is terrific. Robert Amaya was wonderful to work with. He just had a film that was theatrical about a month and a half before ours. So to be able to work with him was good. We shot it, as I said, in Indiana. There was a little bit of B-roll that was shot in Armenia. We are hoping, because obviously there's a war now, it's got very tense again in Eastern Europe, very tumultuous part of the world. But we are hoping to have a screening, a release there. We'll have to see what the coming months bring, but our distributor's very, very confident about it.
Guys, you need to check this out. Debbie and I have seen the film. We loved it. It's called Pursuit of Freedom. And it opened in theaters September 16th, also available on demand. Stelio Savante, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.